For years, she was nothing more than a shadow behind his glass office door. Efficient, invisible, in love with a man who never once looked her way. But when mysterious flowers begin arriving at her desk, each one whispering what he never dared to say, her cold, untouchable boss starts to burn with a jealousy he can't explain and a desire he can no longer deny. He was her boss. She was his secret, and someone else just noticed her first. Hello, family. Welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The rooftop was transformed into something magical. Hundreds of flowers filled every corner. Tulips, roses, peonies, lily, blue hyacinths. Every type of flower she had ever received from her secret admirer. Lanterns hung from wooden frames, casting a soft golden glow over the evening skyline. A table sat in the center, covered in white cloth, set for 2 people. And standing beside, it was Damien Cross. No tie. His jacket was unbuttoned. A single white rose was tucked into his jacket pocket. When he turned and saw Sienna standing at the entrance, his face softened in a way she had never seen before. You remembered all of them? Sienna said quietly, stepping into the garden of flowers. Damien smiled. Of course I did. They made you smile. And I memorized every version of that smile. She walked closer, her heart beating faster with every step. You did all this? Why? She asked. His eyes never left hers. Because I want to make up for the time I wasted. I want you to know that I didn't just fall for you. I've been falling this whole time, and now I want to do it out loud. Sienna felt tears forming in her eyes. Damien reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it slowly. Inside was a ring, simple and elegant. A delicate diamond surrounded by 2 tiny pearls. To the woman who was never invisible, he said, not to me. Not for a second. But how did they get here? How did a boss who never noticed his secretary suddenly end up on a rooftop confessing his love? The answer lies in a mystery that started weeks ago, with flowers that changed everything. The elevators at Crosstech Industries whispered open at exactly 7:30 a.m., just like they did every weekday morning. They dropped Sienna Lewis onto the 40th floor. The air was cold and clean, like the entire building ran on ice instead of electricity. Her high heels clicked softly against the shiny marble floor. It was the only sound in the wide, perfect hallway. She walked past rows of empty desks and dark offices, stopping outside the one that mattered most. Damien Cross's office. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Blinds always halfway down. A nameplate that was both simple and scary at the same time. She unlocked the door to her small assistant's office, which connected directly to his, and began her morning routine. Coffee first. Triple espresso. 1 raw sugar. No milk. Exactly 180 degrees. Anything less, and he would throw it away with just one look. She had learned this the hard way during her first month working for him. She moved quickly and quietly. Computer on. Email loaded. Daily schedule open. She read his schedule, even though she already knew it by heart. Breakfast investor call. Mid-morning pitch review. A quiet window from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m., when he usually stood by the windows and thought deeply. Then a private dinner meeting he never explained. At exactly 8 a.m., the private elevator across from her desk made a soft chiming sound. He was here. Damien Cross, CEO, billionaire, mystery man, in his early 30s, but already a legend in business circles. He had turned a small software company into a global tech empire in under 5 years. He walked through the glass doors with grace and power. People naturally moved aside when he walked by. He wore a dark gray suit today, perfectly fitted like everything else about him. His dark hair was neatly combed. His jaw had just enough stubble to look carelessly perfect. His eyes scanned the office as he entered, and as always, they passed right over her. "Good morning, Mr. Cross," Sienna said softly, offering his coffee as he passed. He replied without looking, taking the cup without stopping. And that was it. No thank you, no eye contact, no recognition of the woman who kept his world from falling apart every single day. She might as well have been part of the furniture. Efficient, necessary, and completely invisible. Sienna sat at her desk and let out a quiet breath. It wasn't like she expected anything different. This had been their pattern for 2 years. She kept everything running smoothly. She made his meetings appear magically organized. She stopped every disaster before it happened. She answered emails for him. She handled his enemies. She calmed angry clients. She made sure his life remained free of problems and chaos. And he only noticed she existed when absolutely necessary. Not because Damien was cruel. She didn't think he was a mean person. But because he seemed uninterested, distant, like noticing her might somehow make her real, and real people were dangerous. Still, she watched him through the glass wall of his office as he drank his coffee and stared at his computer screen. She admired the way his mind worked, fast, smart, never stopping. She had seen flashes of warmth once or twice, buried beneath his cold armor. Like the time he quietly paid for an employee's medical emergency without telling anyone. Or when he personally rescheduled her doctor's appointment when she had been too sick to ask. He noticed things, just not her. She used to dream that one day he would turn and see her, truly see her, not as the efficient assistant, not as the woman who refilled his pens and wrote his apology emails, but as Sienna, a woman with a heart that beat faster whenever he walked by, a woman who had fallen in love with a man who never even learned her favorite color. Now she was slowly learning how to exist with the pain of loving someone who didn't love her back. Her friends called her foolish. Her mother begged her to quit, but her heart refused to leave the battlefield. She shook the thought away and turned her attention to his inbox. 246 unread emails since last night. She began replying in his voice. Calm, exact, powerful. People didn't know it was her words they feared. Her diplomacy they respected. In the world of Crosstech, she had power. But in Damien's eyes, she didn't exist. Monday mornings were always the same at Crosstech. Emails flooded in like ocean waves. The air was tense with coffee and pressure. And Sienna Lewis handled it all perfectly. But this Monday felt different. It began with a message from the receptionist at 9:15 a.m. There's a delivery here for you. Sienna frowned, looking at her calendar. She wasn't expecting anything. No packages. No client deliveries. Curiosity sparked as she made her way downstairs. The lobby was busy with the usual flow of powerful executives and visitors. But the sight waiting at the front desk stopped her. A bouquet. Not just any bouquet. Soft pink tulips tied with cream ribbon, wrapped in pale paper. It was delicate and beautiful. Her breath caught in her throat. Miss Lewis? The receptionist asked, grinning. These are for you. Sienna stepped forward carefully. A small cream-colored envelope was attached. Her name was handwritten in neat, flowing letters. She opened the card. To the woman who blooms even in the shadows. Her fingers tightened around the note as something warm fluttered in her chest. Part confusion, part wonder. She didn't recognize the handwriting. The name or initial gave nothing away. And tulips. They weren't flashy like roses. They were thoughtful, subtle. She carried them back upstairs, still stunned. When she stepped off the elevator, Damien was walking from his office toward the conference room. Their eyes met briefly. A flicker, nothing more. But she saw it, that glance. His eyes dropped to the bouquet in her arms, lingered a second too long, and flicked back to hers. He didn't speak. He turned and walked away. Sienna placed the flowers on her desk carefully, the note tucked beside them. Her heartbeat just a little louder. 2 days later, it happened again. This time, the bouquet arrived mid-morning. Cream roses elegantly arranged in a glass vase, with a silver card that read, "A smile like yours shouldn't go unnoticed." She stared at the card for several seconds, her cheeks warming. It was personal. Romantic, but in a respectful way, not pushy. Not creepy, just observant. It made her feel seen. And she wasn't used to being seen. By noon, the office was buzzing with gossip. People noticed. The receptionist had clearly told others. Eyes peeked over desk walls. Heads tilted toward her desk. Someone even whispered, "Secret admirer," as they passed her in the hallway. But what stood out most to Sienna wasn't the flowers or the whispers. It was Damien. For the first time in 2 years, he spoke to her twice in one day. The first time was about a scheduling problem. He stood closer than usual. Asked if she'd like to move his afternoon meeting so she wouldn't have to stay late. She blinked, surprised, then nodded. "Sure, I'll handle it," she said, confused by the softness in his voice. Then after lunch, as she returned from a quick coffee run, he opened his office door just as she passed. Sienna. Her name sounded strange coming from his mouth. Rare, heavy. He glanced at the flowers again, now 3 arrangements strong, and then at her. "I wanted to make sure you're not being harassed." His concern was awkward. Maybe genuine, but clearly forced. She tilted her head. "You think someone sending me flowers every 2 days is harassment?" He cleared his throat. "Not necessarily. Just making sure you're okay." "I'm fine," she said gently, but there was something in her eyes. A quiet power that made him look away. By the following Monday, there were 4 bouquets on her desk, each one different, each note more intimate than the last. "I see the way you carry everyone else's weight. You deserve softness, too. I hope today is a little easier and that someone tells you how brilliant you are. If not, let this be that." Her fingers traced the edges of the notes. They weren't big declarations. They were details, observations. Whoever H was, he noticed things. And Sienna was beginning to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Wanted, not for her work, not for her silence or loyalty, but for who she was, who someone believed she might be beneath the calm surface. That afternoon, Damien stood in the doorway of his office for several minutes, saying nothing, just watching her. She felt the heat of his stare. When she finally turned to look at him, he spoke, almost too casually. "Do you know who's sending those?" "No," she replied, looking him in the eye for once. "But they clearly pay attention." Something flickered behind his eyes. Jealousy? Discomfort? He nodded, then disappeared into his office without another word. The shift was small at first, barely noticeable, but it was there. Damien, once a ghost in his own right, began to show up. He asked how her weekend was. He offered to grab her a coffee when he left for a meeting, something he'd never done before. He even complimented her once during a team review. "Sienna's the reason half of you still have jobs. Don't forget that." The entire room had gone silent. Sienna barely registered the applause. Her heart was beating too loudly in her ears. She didn't understand what was happening. Why now? Why him? But something told her this wasn't about work efficiency. Not anymore. The man who once saw her as a shadow was beginning to notice her light. And somewhere in the heart of Crosstech's coldest office, jealousy was starting to bloom. Damien Cross had never considered himself an emotional man. He dealt in facts, numbers, control. These were the things that built empires and crushed competitors. He didn't hesitate. He didn't feel things he couldn't measure or understand. And yet, Every time he walked past Sienna's desk, his calm control trembled. There were now 6 bouquets sitting across the corner of her workspace, like an uninvited garden. Each one sent by the mysterious H. Bright, colorful, soft, a complete opposite to the sleek, cold lines of Crostex steel and glass interior. A few team members stopped by her desk to admire them. Some flirted under the excuse of curiosity. Interns giggled when they passed her. Sienna smiled, but not in a flirty way. Her smile was shy, quiet, but genuine, as if something inside her had been quietly waiting to be seen for a long time. And now, finally, someone had noticed. Someone else. Damien saw it all. And it was eating him alive. He closed the blinds in his office for the first time in months, but it didn't help. He could still hear her laugh through the glass. It wasn't loud, but it cut him deep. He never used to hear it at all. Now it was all he could hear. She used to sit in silence, writing in that neat handwriting of hers. Eyes trained on her screen. Posture perfect. Efficient. Quiet. Invisible. He had made her invisible. He had seen her. Of course he had. Every day. Every minute. Every morning when she brought his coffee exactly the way he liked it. When she stayed late without being asked. When she wrote the kind of emails that could calm angry shareholders. When she knew his moods and disappeared before he lashed out. He had noticed her. Always. And because of that, he had ignored her. Damien couldn't afford to be vulnerable. Not at work. Not in his life. Being vulnerable meant being exposed. And being exposed had consequences. He knew that all too well, thanks to a childhood wrapped in cold wars between 2 rich parents who used affection like money and love as a weapon. So when Sienna joined his company smart, capable, and beautiful in a way that didn't ask for attention, he buried the pull he felt under a thick layer of silence. She was too important, too close, too tempting. But now someone else had seen her, and they weren't afraid to show it. He caught himself checking his phone every 2 hours, as if the name H would suddenly pop up in an email or calendar event. No such luck. He asked the receptionist casually. He thought about the deliveries. Anonymous sender, she said with a shrug. Prepaid every 2 days like clockwork. Kind of sweet, don't you think? He didn't answer, because it wasn't sweet. It was infuriating. Every morning, he came in to find a new note resting on Sienna's keyboard, propped neatly against the vase or bouquet. The way you carry yourself, quiet strength, steady grace. I hope someone tells you that today. If not, let this be that. H. He read every one of them when she stepped away from her desk. He told himself he was keeping her safe, protecting her from a stalker, from distraction, from whatever this H person wanted. But the truth was simpler, harder. He read them because he couldn't stand the idea that someone else saw what he saw and had the courage to say it. By Friday, he'd reached his limit. He found himself staring out the windows of his office, empty coffee cup in hand, suit jacket thrown across the back of his chair, trying to make sense of what he was feeling. Jealousy was a petty emotion. He hated it in others, considered it weakness, a distraction from action. But it consumed him now. It didn't just sting. It burned, hot and quiet, like acid beneath his skin. When he passed Sienna's desk and saw yet another bouquet white ranunculus with a gold-tied note, his steps slowed. He forced himself to keep walking. He made it 4 steps before he turned around. "Sienna," he said sharply. She looked up, surprised by the sudden force in his voice. "Yes?" He paused. Her eyes searched his face, waiting for the usual order, the quick instruction. Instead, he asked, "Do you like them, the flowers?" Her expression changed. She sat straighter, confused but interested. "Yes," she said after a moment. "I do. They're thoughtful." He nodded once, tightly, Then he said nothing else and retreated into his office like a man escaping a fire he'd accidentally started. That night, Damien couldn't focus on his work. His phone rang 3 times. His lawyer, his mother, a business partner. He ignored them all. He sat in his chair long after the building emptied, his mind restless. The lights from the city glowed beyond the windows like stars he couldn't touch. His tie lay forgotten on the armrest. He thought of Sienna, how she used to glance at him when she thought he wasn't looking, how she never asked for anything, how her quiet presence filled his space without demanding it. And now someone else was offering her more than he ever had: attention, affection, poetry dressed as compliments. Someone else was doing what he'd been too much of a coward to do. He left the building after midnight, driven by a single thought. He couldn't lose her. Not to H, not to anyone. But the problem was, Damien Cross didn't know how to win someone he had spent 2 years pretending not to want. And worse, he was starting to realize he had never stopped wanting her at all. Sienna didn't trust it at first. Damien Cross was changing. Not dramatically. No grand gestures. No sweeping apologies. But something beneath the surface had shifted, like tectonic plates moving quietly under pressure. Small tremors. Gentle cracks in the ice. It began the day he brought her coffee. He'd never done it before, not once in 2 years. That was her job, knowing his exact preferences, anticipating his cravings. So when she arrived that Tuesday morning to find a steaming to-go cup already on her desk, she froze. At first she thought it was a mistake. Then she saw the note on the sleeve, written in sharp, strong handwriting that could only belong to one man. Almond milk, no sugar, extra cinnamon. Thought you might like a warm start. D. She stared at it for a full minute, unsure whether to smile or panic. When she walked into the office, Damien didn't look up right away. He was at his desk, tie loosened, top button undone. He looked human, less like the legend and more like the man behind it. "You remembered my coffee order?" she said softly, half skeptical, half amused. He looked up, and something flickered across his face. Nerves? "I remember more than you think." That was all he said. Then he turned back to his screen, pretending that what he'd said hadn't just rearranged the atmosphere between them. The next day, he did it again, in a different way. They were walking down the hallway after a tense quarterly meeting with investors. Sienna, as always, was quietly holding his notes and mentally planning 3 follow-up emails. "I've booked you out between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock, he said suddenly. She glanced up. "You mean you're booked between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock?" "No, you are," he clarified. "I cleared your schedule. You've barely taken a lunch break in weeks. Go outside. Eat something that isn't from a vending machine. Do human things." She blinked. "Are you giving me a lunch break?" He looked over at her, expression unreadable. "I'm not a monster, Sienna." Her lips parted in surprise. Then, despite herself, she laughed. A quiet, genuine sound that made him glance away, but not before she caught the slight curve at the corner of his mouth. It was the first real laugh she'd had at work in months. By the end of the week, she didn't know what to make of him. He was still Damien, still intimidatingly brilliant, still demanding, still prone to mood swings when things didn't go his way. But now there were these moments, subtle, deliberate shifts in his behavior. He asked her opinion in meetings, looked at her longer than he should. Once she caught him watching her from across the office, jaw tight, hands clasped as if he were holding something back. He hadn't mentioned the flowers again, and they hadn't stopped coming. On Friday, she received a bouquet of blue hyacinths with a note that read, "There's something about you I can't look away from. I hope he finally does. H." She sat frozen. The message nestled between petals, heat rising to her cheeks. He. The note wasn't vague this time. It referenced someone. H was someone who knew. Someone who had noticed her feelings before Damien ever had. The possibility both thrilled and terrified her. That afternoon, Damien invited her into his office under the excuse of reviewing client contracts. But she knew better. There were no contracts on his desk, no printed documents. Just him, sitting in his chair with one leg crossed over the other, fingers pressed together beneath his chin. "Sienna," he said, "I've been meaning to ask you something." She nodded, cautious. "Okay, these flowers. Are they making you happy?" She blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, I suppose they are." "You suppose?" "They're thoughtful," she said. "Whoever's sending them, they notice me." Her voice was soft, steady, deliberate. It hung between them like a dare. Damien's gaze sharpened, but he didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair. "I've noticed you too," he said. The air went still. Her heart skipped. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Words failed her. He didn't press. He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the skyline. His silhouette was tall, strong, and for once uncertain. "I didn't act on it," he continued, voice low, "because I didn't know how. I've always been better at staying distant. Safer that way." "For who?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to look at her. "For both of us." Or so I thought. For the first time in 2 years, there were no walls between them. No roles, no boss and assistant. Just two people staring across a gap that had been built over time and was now crumbling under the weight of the unspoken. The next morning, Sienna arrived at work to find her desk empty. No flowers, no note. The delivery hadn't come. She tried to ignore the pang of disappointment as she sat down. 5 minutes later, Damien walked in carrying something behind his back. He stopped at her desk and placed a single white peony in a small vase beside her keyboard. No card, no explanation. She looked up, startled. He met her gaze, direct and calm. "I figured I owed you one," he said. Her breath caught. "You sent this?" He smiled, small, genuine, and heartbreakingly rare. "No, but I wish I had." Then he walked away, leaving her speechless. And for the first time, Sienna wondered if maybe, just maybe, Damien Cross was finally ready to fight for what he wanted. The invitation came on a Thursday. It was printed on thick cream card stock, tucked inside a sleek black envelope with silver foil lettering. Elegant, bold, intentional. When Sienna opened it, her eyes scanned the cursive script. "You are cordially invited to the annual Winter Tech Gala. Friday, 8 p.m., the Ivy Grand." She turned the card over. A note was handwritten in the corner. "I'd be honored if you'd come as my guest. H." She stared at it for a long time. Until that moment, H had been a presence. Distant, poetic, charming. Now he had a face. The next day, she found out who he was. His name was Henry Blake. He was a venture capitalist, early investor in Crosstech, a frequent face in Damien's circles. Tall, stylish, effortlessly charming. They'd met once at a strategy summit months ago, where he'd made a quick joke about how Sienna was the one actually running things. At the time, she had smiled politely, thinking it was another smooth line. She had no idea he'd remembered her. No idea he'd been watching from afar. And now he had stepped into the light. When she walked into the Ivy Grand Ballroom that Friday night, all eyes turned to her. But one stare stopped her mid-step. Damien. He stood near the bar in a jet-black tuxedo, a glass of whiskey in hand, his signature coolness suddenly cracking as his gaze collided with hers. Sienna wore a satin navy gown that flowed over her curves like liquid silk. Her hair swept into soft waves over one shoulder. Her lipstick was the color of forbidden things. But it wasn't her dress that made his chest tighten. It was the man beside her. Henry's hand rested lightly at the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd like she belonged to him. He leaned in to say something, and Sienna laughed. It was soft, effortless, the kind of laugh she'd never shared with Damien. And it gutted him. Damien drank too much that night, more than he usually allowed himself in public. But his eyes never left her. Not once. He watched as she and Henry made their rounds, talking to investors, smiling for photos, stealing private moments near the ballroom windows. Henry was clearly attentive, charming, present in ways Damien had never allowed himself to be. At one point, Henry leaned in and brushed something from Sienna's cheek. She blushed. That was it, the breaking point. Later, when the ballroom lights dimmed and the music slowed, Damien found her alone at the refreshment table, swirling sparkling water in a crystal glass. He approached silently. "You clean up well," he said. Sienna turned, startled. Her eyes swept over him. Black on black tuxedo, cufflinks like obsidian, jaw tense. He looked devastating and angry. "You're drunk," she said gently. "Not enough." She arched a brow. "Something wrong?" "I didn't realize you were here as Blake's date," he said. Bitterness laced behind the words. "You never asked if I had plans." He looked at her, really looked at her. "So this is what you want?" She stiffened. "You don't get to ask that now. Not after 2 years of pretending I don't exist." "I didn't pretend," he said, voice low. "I just didn't know how to handle it." "You mean you didn't know how to handle me?" He didn't deny it. They stood there, inches apart, too much unsaid between them. "I've always seen you, Sienna," he said finally. "Every day, every minute." Her breath hitched. "Then why now?" she whispered. "Why wait until someone else came along to make your move?" He swallowed hard. "Because I didn't think I deserved you." She didn't answer. She walked away. The weekend passed in a strange haze. Sienna didn't hear from Damien, and she didn't expect to. What surprised her was Henry. He called. He texted. He asked to see her again. He was handsome, yes. But more than that, he was present. He was trying. And for the first time in years, Sienna felt what it was like to be the one pursued. So she let herself explore it. Let herself enjoy the idea of someone who noticed her without conditions. But no matter how charming Henry was, no matter how many dinners he planned or compliments he gave, there was always something lingering at the back of her mind. A pair of stormy eyes. A single white peony on her desk. A man who had built walls not out of cruelty, but fear. And the truth was, she still wanted him, even when she shouldn't. Monday morning arrived like a storm cloud. The air was tense. The office unusually quiet. Sienna entered the building 5 minutes early, dressed sharply in a fitted plum blouse and black pencil skirt. Her hair pulled back in a sleek twist. She sat at her desk, fingers poised on the keyboard, trying to focus. Damien's door remained closed. At 8:30, it opened. He stepped out, eyes locking with hers. She tensed. He walked over, stopping at her desk, not behind it, not towering over her like usual, but beside her, at her level. "I'm not going to lie," he said calmly. "Watching you with him made me furious." "I know," she said without looking up. "I was jealous, Sienna." She turned slowly. "Good. Now you know how I felt for years." His throat moved with the weight of that. "I can't go back to pretending," he said. "I tried. It nearly drove me crazy." "And what are you going to do about it?" she asked coolly. "I'm going to fight for you," he said. Finally. And then, in a move no one would have believed had they seen it, Damien Cross reached into his jacket and pulled out a single note, handwritten, folded in half. He placed it gently on her desk. "You were never invisible to me. I just didn't know how to look without falling." The storm had broken, and the air between them had never felt clearer. Sienna stared at the note on her desk long after Damien had walked away. His handwriting was unmistakable, controlled, sharp, and yet the words trembled on the paper like something vulnerable, something exposed. You were never invisible to me. I just didn't know how to look without falling. She read it again and again. It felt like truth, like a confession held inside too long, and now lay bare in ink. And it changed something, not because she suddenly forgot the 2 years of silence, of being overlooked, but because it made those 2 years mean something. It reframed him, not as lack of interest, but as resistance. A fight he'd been waging with himself, a war between pride and vulnerability, fear and desire, and for once Damien Cross had lost, and she had won. He didn't push her after that. No dramatic confrontation, no sudden romance movie gestures. Instead, he changed, quietly but completely. Every morning now, he said, "Hello," not mechanically, but with meaning. Sometimes he brought her coffee, not every day, just enough to say, "I remember. I think of you." He began including her in discussions, not as an assistant, but as a partner, an equal. He asked her opinion, listened when she spoke, made space for her. And then, on a Wednesday that began like any other, he surprised her again. "Clear your evening," he said casually, while reviewing a marketing brief. "I want to take you somewhere." She looked up. "Is this work-related?" "No," he said, flipping a page. "It's personal," Sienna's breath caught. 1,000 thoughts ran through her head. What if this ruined things? What if it was too soon? What if he changed his mind? But another voice, the braver one, cut through the noise. "Say yes." "Okay," she said. "Where are we going?" He didn't answer until 6 p.m. A sleek black car pulled up in front of her apartment. The driver held the door open and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a single note. "Trust me." D, and beneath it, an address. She told herself not to overthink it, not to hope too hard. But when she arrived, she realized he had already thought of everything. The rooftop was transformed. It wasn't a restaurant or a hotel, or a grand ballroom. It was the private rooftop garden of Crosstech Tower, usually reserved for board meetings and closed-door executive events. But tonight, it looked like a dream. Hundreds of flowers filled the space. Tulips, roses, peonies, lily, blue hyacinths. Every type of flower she had ever received. Lanterns hung from wooden frames, casting a soft amber glow over the evening skyline. A table sat in the center, draped in white linen, set for 2. And standing beside it was Damien. No tie, jacket unbuttoned, a single white rose tucked into his lapel. When he turned and saw her, everything in his expression softened. "You remembered all of them," she said quietly, stepping into the garden. He smiled. "Of course I did. They made you smile. And I memorized every version of that smile." She walked closer, her heart beating faster with every step. "You did all this? Why?" His eyes never left hers. "Because I want to make up for the time I wasted. I want you to know that I didn't just fall for you. I've been falling this whole time, and now I want to do it out loud." She felt something catch in her chest. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box, and opened it, not kneeling, not rushing, just holding it out like it was something sacred. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a delicate diamond framed by 2 tiny pearls. "To the woman who is never invisible," he said. "Not to me, not for a second." She couldn't speak. The tears came, quiet and warm, not because she was overwhelmed, but because for the first time in years she felt seen, truly, undeniably, completely seen. She took the ring, slipped it onto her finger herself, and stepped into his arms. He kissed her gently, slowly, like a man who had waited 1,000 days to do it right. And when they pulled apart, she whispered, "You took your time." He smiled, forehead resting against hers. But I finally got it right. They stayed on that rooftop for hours, talking about everything and nothing. No titles, no power games, just two people equal in vulnerability and strength. Over dinner, Sienna finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. What about Henry? He sent all those flowers. He noticed me first. Damien's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't look away. Henry's a good man, he admitted, and I'll always be grateful to him. Grateful? He woke me up, Damien said simply. He showed me what I was about to lose. He forced me to face what I'd been running from for 2 years. He took her hand across the table. But Sienna, those flowers weren't what made you beautiful. They just reminded me that I wasn't the only one who could see it. And I couldn't stand the thought of losing you to someone braver than me. So you decided to be brave? She asked softly. I decided to stop being a coward, he corrected. She squeezed his hand. For the record, I was never interested in Henry the way I'm interested in you. Really? Really, she confirmed. He was kind, attentive, everything I thought I wanted. But he wasn't you. Damien's eyes searched hers. And what am I? You're the man I've been waiting for, she said. The one who took his time but finally arrived. The next morning, Sienna arrived at work with Damien. They walked through the lobby together, side by side. Not boss and assistant, partners. The office buzzed with whispers, but neither of them cared. When they reached the 40th floor, Damien turned to her before entering his office. I have a proposition for you, he said. Another one? She teased. He smiled. I want you to be more than my assistant. I want you to be my partner, in business and in life. Vice President of Operations, equal decision-making power. Your name on the door. Sienna's eyes widened. Damien, you've been running half this company for 2 years, he interrupted. It's time everyone knew it. It's time you got the recognition you deserve. What will people say? They'll say I finally made the smartest business decision of my life, he said firmly. And they'd be right. She looked at him. This man who had been a mystery for so long, who had hidden behind walls of ice and control, now standing before her, completely open, completely vulnerable, completely hers. Yes, she said. I accept. He grinned, that rare, genuine smile that made her heart skip. Good, because I wasn't taking no for an answer. 3 weeks later, Crosstech held a company-wide meeting. Damien stood at the front of the conference room, Sienna beside him. I have an announcement to make, he began. Effective immediately, Sienna Lewis will be promoted to Vice President of Operations. She will have full authority to make executive decisions and will be my partner in leading this company forward. The room erupted in applause. Some people looked surprised. Others nodded as if they'd always known. But Sienna stood tall, confidence radiating from her. She was no longer the invisible woman in the shadows. She was exactly where she belonged. That evening, they returned to the rooftop garden. It had become their special place, their sanctuary above the chaos of the city. Sienna leaned against the railing, looking out at the lights below. Damien wrapped his arms around her from behind. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Waiting for me all that time? She turned in his arms to face him. Not for a second, she said. Because you were worth the wait, even when I was cold, distant, impossible. Especially then, she smiled. Because I knew what was underneath. I saw the man you were trying so hard to hide. He kissed her forehead. I don't deserve you. You're right, she agreed with a playful smile. But you're stuck with me anyway. He laughed. A real, full laugh that echoed across the rooftop. And in that moment, Sienna realized something beautiful. Love wasn't always loud. It wasn't always obvious. Sometimes love was quiet, patient, waiting in the shadows until both people were ready to step into the light. Sometimes the best love stories were the ones that took time to bloom. 6 months later, they stood on that same rooftop. But this time, there were chairs arranged in neat rows, flowers everywhere. Close friends and family gathered around. Sienna wore a simple white dress. Damien wore his signature black suit, but with a smile that never left his face. As they exchanged vows, Sienna thought back to those early days. The invisible secretary, the cold boss, the mysterious flowers that changed everything. And she realized that every moment of waiting, every moment of pain, had led them exactly where they needed to be. "I promise to see you," Damien said, his voice strong and clear. "Every single day, in every way, for the rest of my life." "I promise to be patient with you," Sienna replied, tears streaming down her face, "to remind you that you're worthy of love, and to never let you hide from me again." When they kissed, the small crowd cheered. But all Sienna could hear was the beating of her own heart. And all Damien could see was the woman he almost lost. The woman who had been there all along, his partner, his equal, his love. From that night forward, there were no more flowers from strangers. Only the ones he gave her every week without fail. And every card said the same thing in his own handwriting, still falling. D. 1 year later, Sienna sat at her new office right next to Damien's, separated only by a glass door that stayed open most of the time. She was reviewing quarterly reports when she noticed something on her desk. A small package wrapped in cream paper. She smiled, already knowing who it was from. Inside was a framed photograph of them on the rooftop the night he proposed. Below it, a handwritten note. "1 year ago, I almost let fear win. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for teaching me that the best things in life are worth fighting for. I love you more every day." Sienna pressed the note to her heart, then looked through the glass door. Damien was on a conference call, gesturing with his hands, fully focused. But then, as if he felt her watching, he turned. Their eyes met through the glass. He smiled. She smiled back. And in that simple exchange, everything was said. No more shadows. No more hiding. No more pretending. Just two people who finally found the courage to love out loud. True love is not about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about courage, patience, and the willingness to be vulnerable. Sometimes the person meant for you has been there all along, waiting for both of you to be brave enough to take the risk. Don't let fear keep you from the love you deserve. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Share this video with your friends and loved ones. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.